So we will go straight to Madeleine, and off you go.
Thanks very much, Barbara, for that. Yeah, I suppose we're here talking about the border poll and partition, and it's a topic that maybe wouldn't have felt very relevant a couple of years ago, but it has become something that is being talked about a lot more, and particularly around the issue of border poll and United Ireland, and even RTE have been forced to talk about United Ireland when they had the debate on Cllr Burn Live a few weeks ago. So I think when even RTE are forced to discuss these type of issues, you know that it's in the air, and I think there's a number of reasons why this is being discussed now and it's come back on the agenda. And the first reason being Brexit. Um, Obviously, with Britain leaving the EU, there has been a lot of discussion around the Northern Ireland's position in all that, and the border, and so on. So it has raised the questions around the border in Ireland, and it has begun that debate. But also, I think the COVID-19 crisis has really shown us the necessity of cooperation between North and South, so the 6 counties and the 26 counties, I should say, in terms of public health measures, and how impractical it is to have two different states operating on the same Ireland, where you have communities that are so connected between the 32 counties that in the end, I suppose a lot of public health measures had to be aligned between North and South simply out of necessity. So I think these two things have really opened up the debate around partition, about a border poll, about a United Ireland. And it was interesting, I suppose, recently when Boris Johnson said that there's not going to be a border poll in Ireland for a very, very long time. And of course, you kind of think, why, what does he have to do with this, in the sense that here's the Tory Prime Minister of Britain saying you're not allowed basically to make a choice or make a decision uh, about your own country. And actually in the Belfast Agreement, it states that if there was a possibility of a majority vote for a border poll, that the British government have to actually arrange such a poll. However, I mean, it's really crazy that it should be the British government, up to the British government to have such a poll. It should be up to the people of Ireland to decide if a border poll should be held or not. And of course, if there was a border poll, there should be a decision by majority. And nothing else. You shouldn't need to have a 75% vote in favour or anything like that. It should be a majority vote. And I suppose as socialists, we look at the issue of United Ireland and partition and the border poll differently to I suppose people who come from the traditional kind of Republican tradition, in that simply, I think uniting the two states, North and South, is not enough, and and it's not really what the people of Ireland, I think, want. And I think that's why we have to, as socialists, look at United Ireland completely differently. And I suppose, first of all, we should look back to the start and to partition. And when James Connolly, the Irish socialist, said that partition would create a carnival of reaction, he was absolutely correct. In the north, you have sectarianism and violence and the oppression of the Catholic minority for many years in the 6 counties, and then in the Republic, of course, after partition. You have the rule of the Catholic Church and oppression of working class people, and particularly women. in the south, and of course in both sides of that border you have a corrupt state, or two corrupt states, um, that that rule in favor of the elite rather than the ordinary people. And so if you understand partition in that context as a socialist, you have to say, well, of course you would be in favor of a united Ireland. If you look at the history of it and how partitioning the country helped the ruling class keep ordinary people down, then obviously the removal of that border and the reunification should be welcomed by socialists. However, just welcoming a united Ireland is not enough. And for two reasons, I think it's not enough. Because first of all, understanding, as I said, the two corrupt states, and simply just talking about uniting those two corrupt states, what does that actually offer to people, both north and south of the border? And secondly, if we want to bring working class Protestants with us, if we want to win people over to why we should have a united Ireland, then we need to talk about much more than just uniting the two rotten states. So what therefore are we advocating? So I think first of all you have to look at politics, both north and south, and both north and south politics has been dominated by political parties of partition. So from the conservative reactionary DUP to the more moderate and sometimes left-wing Republicans in Sinn Féin, and in between that, of course, you have the neoliberals in Fine Gael and the corrupt nepotism of Fianna Fáil, and all these parties are parties that have sprung from the partition of the country, and in my opinion, we need to move way beyond that in terms of politics. And then, of course, the democratic institutions are not particularly democratic. So both look at Stormont and, of course, Westminster. And then the Dáil, both those institutions are full of conservatives and representatives of the elite and of the golden circle, both north and south. And what we need instead is socialist democracy based on assemblies of the people making decisions about their own lives, and not just about sort of policy making and public finances and so on, but also about the economy, and that requires socialist change. Then, of course, we have a whole string of institutions that I think as socialists we would like to see uh, gone. So, if you take the police, for example, you have in the north you have the PSNI, which is basically the old RUC with a different name put on their logo. And in the south, you have the Gardaí. Both are inherently corrupt institutions, and all we need to do is look at uh, the recent act of the Gardaí of breaking the ex-Debenhams workers' pickets in order to help KPMG remove stock from the shop in Henry Street in Dublin that is being moved up to the north to be sold in the sales up in the north. So here you have, of course, two corrupt police forces, and simply putting those two police forces together and uniting them is not going to do anything for ordinary people in this country. Then there are a number of other issues and institutions where you encounter problems if you're just talking about unification in and of itself. So if you look at education, for example, in the 6 counties, education is very much segregated. And actually, there's been an increase in segregation in education in the north. So between 2006 and 2017, there was an increase in segregated schools. There was 90% of schools in 2006 and 93% of schools in 2017 were segregated in the 6 counties. And then on the other hand, in the Republic, you have an education system that is still predominantly run by religious orders, primarily Catholic religious orders. And so instead, what we need is a state-run education system where every single child is educated on an equal basis, no matter where in the country they live, no matter what background they're from. Another example is healthcare. So how could you possibly expect the people in the north, and I suppose particularly people from the Protestant tradition or the Protestant community, to support a United Ireland if we're asking them to give up the NHS in favour of the HSE and our privatised system of healthcare that is in existence in the Republic? I mean, the HSE is completely incompetent. It's full of overpaid managers, while you have nurses and doctors that are completely overworked, undervalued, and underpaid. And of course, in the north, you've seen Tory cuts really impacting the NHS with nurses and healthcare staff up in the north demanding a pay rise, and they've been offered a measly 1% pay rise for the NHS staff, and this is just not good enough. And considering the year that we've just gone through, this is completely unacceptable, and we need a proper all Ireland 32 county national health service that's free at the point of access for absolutely everyone. And then, of course, we have other institutions such as the judiciary, corrupt institution where the vast majority of people actually who are imprisoned for non-payment of fines. So this is mainly poor people. They're being imprisoned in our prisons. And of course, you have legislations like the Offences Against the State Act, and the special criminal courts that were set up to specifically deal with so-called Republican threats, but could be used, of course, against any organization that is trying to organize to bring real change to this country. So these are all institutions that we don't want to keep. And a United Ireland, for me, would be a socialist Ireland where all these institutions are not kept the way they are, but are completely transformed into a country that's for everyone, and stands for working class people, and not the elite. And I think this brings me on to where we are today, because if you actually look at what's happening, you can see that a lot of the time you have a United Ireland for the rich, because the people at the top are already operating on a 32 county basis. And you can see that in loads of different ways when it comes to holding ordinary people down, but cooperating between themselves to keep their profits and to look after each other. So NAMA, for example, is a very good example of this. Mostly when we think of NAMA, we think of the bailed out developers in the south, but NAMA also included the north, and where Frank Cushnan was involved in very dodgy deals to sell off the Project Eagle portfolio with the help of the DUP's Peter Robinson. So these people say that they want nothing to do with the United Ireland, but they're very happy to cooperate when it comes to bailing out developers. They're very happy to cooperate on a 32 county basis when it comes to look after themselves. And another example would be how political parties, both North and South, including Sinn Féin, by the way, have argued for a long time for tax harmonisation, which basically means lowering corporation tax in the North to 12.5% to allow corporations to get away with not paying their fair share. Again, another example of how the people at the top are cooperating on a 32 county basis. Then I just mentioned the Debenhams dispute, where trucks were hired from the north to take the stock out of the shops in the south, to bring them up to the north to have them sold off on sale. Um, Another example is Drew Harris. Drew Harris was the Deputy Chief Constable of the PSNI before he was hired as the Garda Commissioner. And his background, as I mean, he was an RUC police officer, then obviously became part of the PSNI. And his background was seen as a major advantage in his getting that role. And he's now paid 250,000 a year to basically bring his experience from from his being involved in the RUC down to the Gardaí in the south. So that's a very interesting example of how the elites work together on a cross-border basis. Um, and it's interesting that they then say that, oh no, we can't have a united Ireland for ordinary working class people, but we are going to keep cooperating to look after the golden circle, to look after the elites, to look after the profits of the corporations. But you can't have you people, working class people, cannot have a united Ireland. And I think just to finish off in the last couple of minutes, I think it's important to make these points and to argue for a different type of united Ireland, for a socialist Ireland, because it is only by doing that, and by socialists being involved in struggles, both north and south, that we can, first of all, bring people with us, and particularly bring people in the north from the Protestant tradition, or from the Protestant background, or from that community with us to a better Ireland, to a better country, and to offer them something better than what they have now. Because a lot of people in the Protestant community, in the working class communities, feel like they've been left behind. And of course, this is because of Tory cuts, because of the austerity that's been implemented since the economic crisis in the north, where both Catholic and Protestant working class communities have suffered enormously since that recession. And because of the politics in the north, um, there has been struggles. However, sometimes the anger of people can be diverted, and that's what we've seen obviously recently with the recent riots in the north, and almost every year with the 12th of July parades and all that, that you see the anger of working class people, particularly from the Protestant and Unionist communities, being their anger being diverted into violence and sectarianism. And that's why we need socialists in those communities to put forward a different message, to say, actually, we need to unite the working class Protestants, working class Catholics across the divides, because partition serves the elite. They are the ones who are benefiting from division, from sectarianism, and have benefited from partition. And to do that, we need socialist organisations in all our communities to make these arguments, and to organise working class people together, so that we can unite and fight for a completely different Ireland, for an Ireland for everyone, that doesn't look after the elite and the corporations, but look after ordinary people, and that's a socialist Ireland. So I think I'll leave it at that and open it up for discussion.
Okay, Madeleine, thank you so much. That was incredibly insightful.